Or am I J2? I'm not sure. We're all the J's though.
That's fine. We know who we are.
Yeah. How's everything going?
It's going good. As soon as the coronavirus hit, what Bill de Blasio, our mayor, did was he released some of the prisoners. The other thing is that happened with coronavirus is, of course, the entire economy went down as a result of a lockdown. So,
well, let me interject a point. So, de Blasio released the prisoners due to coronavirus implications or complications.
That is what we're told, that this is due to coronavirus.
Oh, okay.
So some prisoners were released. They were not hard criminals,
right?
But they were criminals. And so now comes the lockdown. Now, as a result of that, the economy shuts down and crime goes up. If we're looking at some of the articles on the web, like for example, there's a CNN article from the 16th of June, and they're indicating that burglaries have sharply increased with 1,691 incidents as compared to 759 the year before. Burglaries are up 47%. They're saying car thefts have increased over 60%. And another source, New York One, that's our television station, is saying that there's a 402% increase in burglaries in the city compared to the same period last year. And burglary arrests increased 705%, and so on. So car theft, they also indicated, is up. So the crime is up. So then we have the protests. And what does Bill de Blasio do? How does he react to the protests? Well, he disbands the undercover department of the New York City Police Department. And he also, in effect, he defunds part of the police by diverting the funds, some of the funds the police department is supposed to use, to the social services department. So just by looking at the facts, my question is Bill de Blasio just a weak mayor, and he's reacting? That is his reaction to the protests, or there is something more? So when crime goes up, as it did tremendously in New York City, is it a prudent mayoral decision to defund the police, to disband the undercover unit? To me, it doesn't make any sense. And so I'm questioning, is Bill de Blasio, our mayor, is he just a weak mayor who's giving in to the protesters, or there's something else there? Is he connected to the terrorist organization Antifa, maybe? Or maybe he's even connected to some other organized crime groups. I think that Bill de Blasio should be investigated.
That's pretty deep to correlate his, let me backtrack, not even political decisions, to correlate his managerial decisions with the possibility that he might be connected to organized crime groups. Because let's look at it this way, right? The fact that crime rates, different categories have risen compared to last year. And there could be a number of reasons why. I haven't studied particularly or saw any studies in terms of why the crime rates in various categories have risen. But I will say this, right? Historically, there's a direct correlation between the rise in crime and the rise in unemployment, the rise in the lack of opportunity for whatever reason. right?
Agreed. I agree.
In this case, in this particular circumstance, the reason for the rise in unemployment is what? It's COVID. Like we saw huge, tremendous rises in unemployment. I mean, literally millions of people who were directly impacted by COVID. Now, of course, because remember, before COVID hit, we had record low unemployment. Like that's a fact.
Correct.
So now after we have record high unemployment, that's direct correlation.
Well, we have 47 million Americans who have applied for first-time unemployment benefits within 3 months.
That's right. So, and it's all directly related to the COVID situation. Directly related. Yeah. So that being said, crime based on the economic circumstances was going to rise.
Yes.
And it did. So that had nothing to do with any decisions, managerial. And I'm not going to call them political, but I'll call them managerial decisions that de Blasio made. Now, I'm saying this not as a defender. I don't care one way or the other about de Blasio. I didn't vote for him. I'm not against him, but I didn't vote for him, right? But I'm just looking purely at historic and how these things arise. Unemployment, crime, there's a direct correlation. So that's the first thing. And secondly, we look at a decision, let's look at the protests. And out of the protests came a call for defunding police, right? So I had to do a little research because to me, on the face of it, just the word defunding the police, what does that mean? What does that even mean? Does that mean to get rid of the police? And so every scholarly study that I've seen regarding defunding the police, and this is from diverse groups like the Brookings Institute, or you have some urban groups, or you have some conservative groups, they all say the same thing, that defunding the police does not mean disbanding the police. And so that's what I thought initially. I'm like, what are they saying? They want to get rid of the police? That's insane. We need we need police force, and our tax dollars go towards funding the police, right? So there's a difference there. And I think what's happening, at least in my mind initially, right, was that I was correlating defunding with disbanding, and they're two completely different things. So if they're not disbanding the police and they're calling for defunding, so let's examine what that means, to defund the police. What it means is money that is out, and you probably know this as well, I'm just talking to the choir, right? It means that money that has been allocated towards police budgets will now, parts or portions of that budget will be used for social services, right? No matter what those, social, let's see, what did they mention? Homeless services, social workers, some money that would be going towards food kitchens and other places. Now, so what you would have to, so then you ask yourself, all right, if they're removing money from the police budget, if they're taking money away from the police budget, how does that impact the police? How does it impact them, right? Well, there's one study where they saw that the police in this particular jurisdiction, I think it was in Buffalo, what they did was they allocated $1 billion to acquire secondhand military hardware. This is what they use the money for, military hardware, right? Now, we could argue whether or not it's needed, right? I mean, that's really not the focus of what we're talking about. But my feeling is this: we need tanks in the streets, or could that money be better spent? Let's say, funding, I don't know, food banks for people who are out of work right now. And so these are the decisions that municipalities are making. They're saying, look, we've allocated literally billions of dollars to the police, right? They do an essential job. But do we need to continually fund them in this manner? And so what I mean by that is when Municipalities are under fiscal stress and they need to cut the budgets. They will cut school programs. They will cut um, sanitation. They'll cut fire. They cut all these different services, but they won't touch the police. They never touch the police. And the reason they don't is because police unions are very powerful, and that's just a fact. You ask anyone, or if you look at any of the reports, they all say the same thing. It's the police unions that make it so that police budgets are untouchable. Anyway, you want to take it from there? Because I'm just rattling on.
I understand thank you. I understand for what you just said, what defunding really means. So thank you for that. My argument is that, was it wise? When the crime goes up, was it wise to do it? Yes. We have also people who are unemployed, they need to eat, people who have no jobs. But at the same time, the crime level goes up. So yes, you need the money to fund food for these people, whatever else expenses they have. Yes, I agree. But at the same time, crime goes up. And at that time, that's when it goes up tremendously. Like I said, one report said that 402% increase in burglaries and burglary arrests have increased 705%. These are huge numbers of increase. So my point is, this is not the time to take money away from the police. And so when de Blasio does take the money away, you have to question why is he doing it? I think there's enough suspicion to start an investigation.
And that's actually the second part of the unpacking, right? But and even before I get there, because that's kind of explosive, before I get there, I'll go back to whether or not defunding police is wise at this particular time. And so what I would do, because, okay, you can look at things from a macro level, right? Like defunding the police and rising crime. That's macro. And micro is, well, what kind of crimes are being committed right now? What kind of crimes? Where would the money come from in the police budget to enact this defunding? You see what I mean? So, if I look at it from an alarmist perspective, I could say, oh, defund the police. But if I were to use sort of like a scalpel, right, like become a surgeon about this, like, well, there are areas in the police department, I mean, I'm not sure, but I'm just speculating that there may be some redundancy. There may be some overkill. I don't think police, and this is my personal feeling, I don't think police need military hardware, and they spend millions of dollars on this hardware. Now, that's one side. And then the other side is, well, crimes rise during times of fiscal instability, unemployment, and so forth. But that could be mitigated if you took money and you funded certain programs, right? Because one of the reasons the crimes may be increasing is because people don't have the money and the resources to feed their families. And if they knew that they could go to any food bank or whatever and shop for food or whatever, maybe they wouldn't be as likely to commit those crimes. That's a possibility, right? Now, I'm not saying that this is something that that is surely correlated, but if that was the case. The other thing is, well, maybe some of the money could go towards this whole guaranteed income thing, where if you put money in people's pockets, right, out of the police budget and into people's pockets, that might mitigate crime. So, and then part of the argument would be, well, I don't want my money to go into anybody's pockets, but guess what? Your money, as far as the police budget is concerned, is going into somebody's pocket because they're using it to buy military hardware or other things that may not be necessary. So your money is being spent one way or the other.
I hear you. in our case, in New York City, I am not aware of us spending money on tanks or any, the heavy military equipment. There might be, I'm just not aware of. And so, but what we do know is that Bill de Blasio, our mayor, dispersed the undercover unit. That is not something you're talking about. That is something that I think I believe it should not have been done.
I see. Oh, well, I was going to get to that. So, okay, so let's look at that. From what I know about that, so there's two ways to look at it. One is you could say he dispersed it, everybody fired, they're all unemployed now, but that's not actually what happened. What happened is it was a unit, and he disbanded the unit, and the people who were part of the unit, they were reassigned to different areas in the police department. So now, why did he disband this unit of undercover police officers? Like, why did he do that, right? Because, the correlation could be made, well, okay, so there's burglaries and other things going on, and so this undercover unit could have worked towards stopping it. Maybe, and maybe not. Maybe the undercover unit, their focus was something else entirely, right? What was the focus of the undercover unit? And I'm just raising questions, right? Of course, I'm raising questions for my...
As far as I was reading, it was gang-related activity, organized crime, that kind of thing. And I'm sure they're involved in auto theft and burglaries.
Yes, right. Okay. And so now, because of this defunding, so let's look at moments in time, I guess. Let's look at when the disbanding took place and when the increases in crime took place. So from what I understand, this disbanding recently took place. The crime has been increasing for months already. So you could say, well, the crime has been increasing. What have they done to mitigate this increase in crime? Like, crime is still increasing. This unit, in theory, is supposed to be the wall between us and this band of criminals, and yet we're still being affected by it. Will it make a difference that they're here, that they're gone? Will it even make a difference?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. But even more. But go ahead.
If the fact was that the unit was not effective, then that would justify the decision.
These are questions. These are things that.
But we don't know.
Right. So now, I think the thing to do would be to examine very closely why that decision was made. And I haven't done that yet. I haven't done it, but I will. I haven't done it. So, but just looking at it, I guess, globally, right? Looking at the big picture, you don't want to disband a police department, but defunding, in terms of how it's been looked at, in terms of how it's been defined, I'm not necessarily against. I am against disbandment, right, or disbanding, but I'm not necessarily against defunding. It's just a reallocation of resources, and I think I do lean towards, at least where this is concerned, in terms of social agendas, right? I lean towards social services. I lean towards food banks, and as opposed to the heavy hand where you say, well, if you get out of line, I'm just going to toss you in jail. I think that there are other ways to deal with that. Now, if you do something, look, there are crimes and there's punishment. There's punishments associated with crime. You do that crime, you're going to do the time. And that's the way it should be. However, if we could implement programs that prevent people from even considering doing a crime, everything from child care, from immunizations, from food banks, from school lunches, social workers, all of these different social programs that could prevent someone from...
I understand. You have an assumption that crime is caused by poverty.
Well, not necessarily. However, I will say this, right? Yeah, not necessarily. I would say that crime is, you know what, it's multifaceted. Crime can be caused. Yeah, it's just.
We know that the mafiosi, they were not poor.
And look at it this way too, right? People who rob SNLs, right? They're not poor either.
That's right.
Right? People who and now that we're on that topic, I would even argue this, that a guy who snatches a pocketbook, right, has an effect on the life of the person whose pocketbook he snatched, right, and her family and so forth. A guy who robs an SNL can bring down an entire neighborhood. You see what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
And from his crime,
yes,
right? People lose their homes, their jobs,
correct,
and other things.
Correct. White collar crime is a crime. Yes, and has wide range of implications.
Right. But, huge implications, because if I lose my job because somebody raided a bank and my employer can no longer get a loan, well, now he put me out of work. My kids, it's just a whole. As opposed to someone who snatches a pocketbook. However, let me just continue.
Yes.
The easy target is the pocketbook snatcher, because you don't have to think about that. You don't have to think. There's no thought. Oh, he snatched a pocketbook, go to jail. But now, when you talk about a bank executive, now you have to put some thought into that. Like, what are the implications of his crime? Most people are not willing to put that thought in.
Yes. So we do agree then that diverting the money to social services will not necessarily solve the issue of rising crime.
I wouldn't necessarily say that. I would just say that it's multifaceted. I would say that it is part of the puzzle. It's definitely, it's not the answer, but it's part of the puzzle.
Okay.
Definitely part of the solution. Definitely. It's not the only thing, but it's part of it.
I think we have to wind up because I have to leave soon.